The Galactic Academy assessment captain. Vexthul adjusted his 4 eyes as he reviewed the latest batch of recruitment files from Earth. The Galactic Combat Academy had been accepting human applicants for 3 years now, ever since humanity joined the Confederation. Most humans showed promise in 1 or 2 combat disciplines, but they were generally considered a mid-tier species in terms of fighting capability. The file that caught his attention belonged to Maya Chen, a 17-year-old human female from Earth's Asian continent. Her physical assessment scores were concerning. Height, barely 5 feet 2 inches. Weight, 98 pounds. Muscle density, below average even for human standards. Medical notes indicated she had been born with a rare genetic condition that prevented normal muscle development, leaving her physically weaker than most children half her age. Why is this applicant even being considered? Vexthul muttered to his assistant, a towering Krell warrior named Brutak. Brutak's massive shoulders shrugged. Human sentiment, Captain. Their governments insist on equal opportunity, regardless of physical limitations. The girl applied, so we must test her. On the Academy's main training deck, Maya stood among 200 other recruits from across the galaxy. Massive Gorillian soldiers flexed their tree-trunk arms. Agile serpentine fighters coiled and uncoiled their muscular bodies. The insectoid mantis warriors clicked their razor-sharp claws menacingly. Everyone looked formidable, everyone except Maya. She appeared tiny and fragile among the assembled warriors, her loose academy uniform hanging off her slight frame like a tent. Several recruits openly laughed when they spotted her. A hulking Gorillian named Crash pointed at her and made what passed for a chuckle among his species. "Look, they sent us a human child," he rumbled. "She looks like she would break if I breathed on her too hard." Maya said nothing, but her dark eyes remained calm and observant. She watched as Instructor Zephon, a veteran of 50 galactic conflicts, began explaining the first assessment. "Combat effectiveness is measured across 12 disciplines," Zephon announced, his gravelly voice echoing through the chamber. "Armed combat, unarmed combat, tactical warfare, stealth operations, vehicular combat, zero-gravity fighting, aquatic warfare, aerial combat, psychological warfare, electronic warfare, survival skills, and leadership under fire. Most recruits excel in 2 or 3 areas. Academy graduates typically master 4 or 5. Elite warriors might achieve competency in 7. He paused, scanning the crowd. No being in recorded history has ever achieved mastery in all 12 disciplines. Today we begin with unarmed combat assessment. The recruits were divided into groups of 10. Maya found herself grouped with some of the largest and most intimidating warriors present. Crash the Gorillian was there, along with a mantis warrior whose claws gleamed like polished steel, and a draconian whose scales seemed to shimmer with built-in armor. The first test was simple. Each recruit would face off against a combat drone programmed with basic fighting algorithms. The drones were humanoid in shape but moved with mechanical precision, testing reflexes, strength, and technique. One by one, the recruits stepped forward. Crash grabbed his drone and literally crushed its torso with his bare hands. The Mantis warrior sliced through 3 drones before they could even activate their defensive protocols. Each demonstration of power and skill drew approving nods from the instructors. Then it was Maya's turn. She stepped into the combat circle, looking impossibly small against the 7-foot-tall combat drone. The machine's sensors analyzed her, likely calculating that minimal force would be required for victory. Its red optical sensors focused on her as it assumed a basic fighting stance. "Begin," announced Instructor Zephon. The drone moved forward with a straightforward punch aimed at Maya's center mass. To everyone watching, it should have been over immediately. The frail human girl should have been knocked unconscious or worse. Instead, something impossible happened. Maya's body moved like water flowing around a stone. She didn't block the punch or try to absorb its impact. Instead, she simply wasn't there when it arrived. The drone's fist passed through empty air as Maya seemed to melt to one side. Her small hand touched the drone's extended arm, and suddenly the massive machine was tumbling through the air, crashing into the arena wall with enough force to dent the reinforced metal. The watching recruits fell silent. Even the instructors looked confused. "Malfunction," Brutak muttered. The drone must have malfunctioned, but Instructor Zephon had been watching carefully. His enhanced vision had caught something the others missed. The girl hadn't just dodged. In the split second of contact, she had identified the exact pressure point needed to disrupt the drone's gyroscopic balance while simultaneously redirecting its momentum. It was a technique so advanced that even veteran warriors struggled to execute it properly. "Send in another drone," he commanded. This time, the instructors activated a combat drone programmed with intermediate-level fighting algorithms. It approached Maya more cautiously, analyzing her previous movement patterns. The machine feinted left, then struck right, using a combination that had defeated most previous recruits. Maya didn't even seem to be trying. She moved like she was dancing, each step perfectly timed and placed. The drone threw 17 punches and kicks in rapid succession, each one missed by millimeters as Maya flowed around the attacks like smoke. Then, with a movement so subtle that most watchers missed it entirely, she touched the drone's central processing unit. The machine simply shut down. She had somehow found and activated its emergency shutdown switch during the combat sequence, all while making it look like an accident. Instructor Zephon's 4 hearts began beating faster. In 50 years of training warriors, he had never seen anything like this. The girl wasn't stronger or faster than her opponents. She was something far more dangerous. She was perfect. As Maya walked back to her position among the stunned recruits, she caught Captain Vexthul staring at her intently. She met his gaze calmly and offered a small, polite smile. For the first time in his long military career, the veteran captain felt a chill of uncertainty. What exactly had Earth sent them? The Weapon Master's challenge 3 days after the unarmed combat assessment, the Academy buzzed with rumors about the small human girl. Some claimed the combat drones had been sabotaged. Others insisted she had some kind of technological enhancement hidden beneath her skin. A few whispered that humans possessed mysterious abilities they had kept secret from the Galactic Confederation. Maya paid no attention to the speculation. She spent her free time in the Academy's vast library, reading tactical manuals and historical accounts of famous battles. When other recruits approached her table, she would look up with that same calm, polite smile and answer their questions in her soft voice. "How did you defeat those drones?" asked Zira, a young Serpentine warrior whose people were renowned for their combat prowess. "I watched how they moved," Maya replied simply. "Everything has patterns. Once you understand the pattern, you can predict what comes next." Zira's scaled brow furrowed. "But you're so small. How do you generate enough force?" Maya tilted her head thoughtfully. "Force isn't always about strength. Sometimes it's about timing and placement. A river can carve through mountains, not because water is harder than stone, but because it's persistent and finds the right path." The next assessment was armed combat, overseen by Weapon Master Korthak, a legendary draconian warrior who had never been defeated in single combat. His collection of scars told the story of battles across 17 star systems, and his reputation was such that even veteran soldiers spoke his name with reverence. The weapons hall contained every type of combat implement known to galactic civilization. Energy swords that could cut through starship hulls, plasma rifles capable of vaporizing armored vehicles, neural whips that attacked the nervous system directly, gravity hammers that could pulverize concrete, and thousands of other instruments of destruction. Korthak's golden eyes surveyed the assembled recruits with barely concealed disdain. "Weapon mastery is not about choosing the biggest gun," he growled, his voice like grinding stone. "It is about understanding that every tool has a purpose. Every situation demands a specific response, and true warriors adapt to any circumstance." He gestured to the weapons racks. "Each of you will face 3 challenges. First, you will demonstrate proficiency with your species' traditional weapons. Second, you will engage in combat using an unfamiliar weapon type. Third, you will face a scenario where you must achieve victory using only improvised weapons." The demonstrations that followed were impressive. Crash the Gorillion wielded a massive war club with devastating effect, reducing target dummies to splinters with every swing. The Mantis warrior made energy blades sing through the air like deadly music, cutting complex patterns that would have sliced through multiple opponents. A young Draconian breathed controlled fire while spinning twin plasma whips, creating a sphere of destruction around himself. When Maya's turn came, she approached the weapons rack and selected a simple wooden staff, barely as tall as herself. The weapon looked like a child's toy compared to the advanced armaments her fellow recruits had chosen. Korthak's expression was unreadable. "Demonstrate your proficiency with human traditional weapons," he commanded. Maya bowed slightly, then began to move. The staff became an extension of her body, spinning and striking in fluid motions that seemed more like art than combat. She struck targets with precise angles and force, each hit perfectly calculated. But what caught the instructor's attention wasn't the strikes themselves, but how she moved between them. She never seemed to be in the same place twice. The staff would block imaginary attacks while simultaneously positioning for the next strike. She fought against opponents who weren't there, defending against combinations that existed only in her mind. Yet every movement had purpose and deadly efficiency. Impressive form, Korthak admitted. Now select an unfamiliar weapon. Maya studied the racks for several moments before choosing an energy whip, one of the most difficult weapons to master. The weapon required precise control to prevent the wielder from injuring themselves, and most students needed months of training before they could use it safely. She activated the weapon and immediately began moving. The energy whip crackled through the air. But instead of the wild, uncontrolled swings most beginners produced, Maya's movements were surgical in their precision. She struck targets at impossible angles, used the whip's flexibility to attack around obstacles, and even managed to disarm a practice dummy by wrapping the energy cord around its weapon and yanking it away. The watching recruits exchanged nervous glances. How was someone so physically weak generating enough control to handle such a demanding weapon? Adequate, Korthak said, though his tone suggested he was more impressed than he wanted to admit. Now for the final test. You will enter the combat maze using only improvised weapons. Your goal is to neutralize 12 hostile targets. You may use anything you find within the maze except manufactured weapons. The combat maze was a three-dimensional labyrinth filled with obstacles, hidden enemies, and environmental hazards. Most recruits took 30 to 40 minutes to complete it, and many suffered injuries in the process. Maya disappeared into the maze entrance, her small form quickly swallowed by the shadowy corridors. What happened next would become legend at the academy. The monitoring screens showed Maya moving through the maze like a ghost. She picked up a broken piece of metal pipe and somehow used it to disable 3 armed combat drones. A handful of small stones became projectiles that struck enemy sensors with sniper-like accuracy. She turned a length of cable into a strangling weapon, used a broken chair leg as a precise striking instrument, and somehow weaponized a standard emergency light by shorting out its power cell to create a targeted electromagnetic pulse. The most incredible moment came when she encountered 4 advanced combat drones in a large chamber. With no cover and no apparent weapons, she should have been overwhelmed immediately. Instead, she grabbed a simple cleaning cloth from a maintenance station. The cloth became a distraction tool, a binding weapon, and finally, a method for redirecting the drones' own attacks against each other. In less than 3 minutes, all 4 machines were destroyed, and Maya emerged from the chamber without a scratch. She completed the entire maze in 14 minutes and 37 seconds, a new academy record. When she emerged, Weapon Master Korthak was waiting for her personally. His ancient eyes studied her face as if trying to read a complex equation. How? He asked simply. Maya considered the question seriously. Every object has potential energy waiting to be released. Every situation contains tools if you know how to see them. My grandmother used to say that a master doesn't need the perfect weapon because they can make any weapon perfect. Korthak nodded slowly. In 700 years of life, he had met only 3 beings who truly understood that principle. Now there was a 4th, and she was barely more than a child by galactic standards. That night, he added a special notation to Maya's file. Recommend immediate advancement to Master Class Weapons Training. Subject demonstrates intuitive understanding of universal combat principles. Captain Vexthal read the report 3 times before believing it. A human who had mastered weapons mastery in a single afternoon. It should have been impossible, but the video evidence was undeniable. Whatever Maya Chen was, she was far more than she appeared to be. The tactical genius emerges word of Maya's performance had reached the highest levels of Academy command. Admiral Korveth himself, Supreme Commander of the Galactic Combat Academy, had requested a private briefing about the unusual human recruit. His massive form dominated the conference room as Captain Vexthal presented the evidence. You're telling me this physically inferior human has achieved perfect scores in both unarmed and armed combat? Admiral Korveth's voice carried the weight of authority earned through countless battles. Not just perfect scores, Admiral. She's demonstrating mastery that our instructors have never seen before. Weapon Master Korthak believes she could teach advanced courses. Admiral Korveth's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. His species, the hive-minded Zentorians, were known for their logical approach to warfare and their ability to process multiple tactical scenarios simultaneously. Bring me her next assessment results before drawing conclusions. Tactical warfare will reveal if this is genuine competence or merely unusual physical coordination. The tactical assessment was designed to test strategic thinking, battlefield awareness, and leadership capabilities under pressure. Recruits were divided into teams and given command of simulated military units in complex battle scenarios. Most students struggled with the multi-layered decision-making required, often becoming overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information they needed to process. Commander Thos, the Academy's chief tactical instructor, briefed the assembled recruits on their mission parameters. The simulation involved defending a colony world against a three-pronged invasion force while managing limited resources and unpredictable civilian populations. Each team will command 50,000 simulated troops across land, air, and space theaters, Commander Thos explained. You will have 6 hours to achieve victory conditions, preserve at least 60% of civilian population, maintain control of 3 strategic objectives, and neutralize the invasion force. Maya found herself assigned as a mid-level tactical officer on a team led by Valorian Stark, a promising young officer from the militaristic Proximan Empire. Stark was known for his aggressive tactics and had achieved high scores on previous assessments. "Listen up, inferior species," Stark announced to his team, his metallic voice dripping with condescension. "I'll handle overall strategy. The rest of you will follow my orders precisely. The human girl can observe and try to learn something useful." The simulation began with immediate crisis. Enemy forces struck from unexpected angles while natural disasters simultaneously threatened civilian evacuation routes. Stark's initial response was textbook aggressive: commit maximum forces to eliminate threats quickly. Within the first hour, his approach was proving catastrophic. Enemy forces were using the chaos to their advantage. Civilian casualties were mounting rapidly, and his aggressive deployments had left critical positions undermanned. Maya watched the tactical displays with growing concern. She could see patterns that Stark was missing, weaknesses in enemy formations that could be exploited, and resource allocations that would maximize effectiveness. But when she tried to suggest alternatives, Stark dismissed her immediately. "Quiet, human. I don't need advice from someone who probably couldn't lift a standard rifle." By hour 3, their team was failing spectacularly. Civilian casualties had reached 80%, 2 strategic objectives had fallen, and enemy forces were advancing on all fronts. The other team members were becoming increasingly frustrated with Stark's rigid adherence to failed strategies. Finally, Zira, the Serpentine warrior, spoke up. "Stark, your approach isn't working. Maybe we should listen to other ideas." "I am in command here," Stark snarled. "Anyone who questions my authority can face disciplinary action." Maya made a decision that would change everything. She quietly activated her personal communicator and began issuing orders directly to individual unit commanders within the simulation. Her clearance level should have prevented this, but she had spent her library time learning Academy communication protocols and had found a loophole in the command structure. What happened next seemed like magic to the watching instructors. Suddenly, the tide of battle began to turn. Units that had been retreating started fighting with renewed effectiveness. Supply lines that had been chaotic became models of efficiency. Civilian evacuations that had been disasters transformed into smooth operations. Maya was fighting a completely different war than Stark imagined. While he focused on large-scale troop movements and direct confrontations, she was orchestrating something far more sophisticated. She identified that the enemy's real weakness wasn't their military strength, but their communication systems. Instead of fighting their forces directly, she began targeting their coordination networks. She used small, fast units to disrupt enemy communications while simultaneously spreading false information through captured channels. Enemy forces began receiving contradictory orders, attacking each other, and abandoning strategic positions based on fabricated intelligence. Meanwhile, she reorganized civilian evacuations by treating them as tactical assets rather than burdens. Civilian transport vehicles became decoy convoys that drew enemy fire away from military objectives. Refugee camps were positioned to provide early warning systems and intelligence gathering points. Most remarkably, she turned natural disasters into tactical advantages. When an earthquake threatened a major city, instead of committing resources to immediate rescue efforts, she used the seismic activity to mask the movement of her heaviest military units, allowing them to achieve complete surprise against enemy positions. By hour 5, their team had achieved complete victory. Not only had they met all mission objectives, they had done so while suffering minimal casualties and preserving 94% of the civilian population. Stark stared at the results in confusion. How is this possible? I gave no orders that should have produced these outcomes. The other team members were looking at Maya with new respect. Zira was the first to speak. Maya was issuing direct orders to individual units. Somehow she coordinated the entire battle while making it look like she was just observing. Commander Thos had been monitoring all communications and tactical decisions in real time. His analysis showed that Maya had managed 17 different operational theaters simultaneously, processed logistics for over 200 supply lines, and coordinated the activities of thousands of individual units, all while maintaining perfect situational awareness. Impossible, he muttered to his assistants. No single being has the cognitive capacity to process that much information simultaneously. She would need the computational power of a tactical supercomputer, but the evidence was undeniable. Maya had single-handedly orchestrated one of the most sophisticated military victories in the simulation's history, and she had done it while appearing to do nothing more than quietly observe. When called forward to explain her performance, Maya's response was characteristically modest. I noticed that information flow was more important than troop strength, she said simply. If you can control what your enemies know and when they know it, you can make them defeat themselves. Also, every problem contains the seeds of its own solution. The earthquake that threatened civilians also provided the perfect cover for troop movements. The key is learning to see opportunities instead of just obstacles. Admiral Korveth reviewed the tactical recordings personally. His multiple brains processed the data streams in parallel, trying to understand how a single individual had achieved what should have required a team of specialists working with advanced AI support. The conclusion was unavoidable. Maya Chen wasn't just competent at tactical warfare. She was operating at a level that exceeded anything in their previous experience. That night, he made a decision that would reshape Academy protocols. Maya Chen would be advanced to elite-level assessments immediately. If she continued performing at this level, they would need to completely reevaluate their understanding of human capabilities. The Shadow Walker. The Stealth Operations Assessment was traditionally one of the most challenging tests at the Academy. Unlike previous evaluations that took place in controlled environments, this assessment occurred in a real urban environment on the Academy's training planet. Recruits had to infiltrate an active military base, retrieve classified information, and escape without being detected by advanced security systems and trained guards. Master Infiltrator Whisper, a legendary operative whose real name and species were classified, briefed the candidates in her characteristic soft monotone. Her form seemed to shift and blur even in bright light, making it difficult to focus on her directly. Stealth is not about invisibility, she explained. It is about understanding perception, manipulating expectations, and moving through the spaces between attention. You will infiltrate Installation 7, retrieve Data Crystal Omega-9 from the central vault, and extract without triggering any alarms. You have 8 hours. Most of you will fail. The installation was a fortress of modern military technology. Motion sensors covered every approach. Thermal imaging systems monitored all building access points. AI-controlled guard drones patrolled predetermined routes, and elite draconian sentries maintained watch from elevated positions. The security briefing alone took 30 minutes to complete. Maya studied the installation schematics with the same calm intensity she applied to everything else. While other recruits focused on identifying potential weaknesses in the security perimeter, she seemed to be analyzing something entirely different. "What are you looking at?" asked Talon, a young mantis warrior whose species were naturally gifted at stealth operations. "The patterns," Maya replied quietly. Security systems are designed by logical minds, which means they follow predictable patterns. But more importantly, I'm studying the people who work there. Guards get tired, maintenance workers follow schedules, and everyone has habits. She pointed to a section of the blueprints showing the facility's waste management system. This installation processes waste every 6 hours. During processing cycles, the environmental monitoring systems are temporarily recalibrated to account for chemical emissions. That creates a 12-minute window where certain sensors are operating at reduced sensitivity. Talon's compound eyes studied the schematics, but the waste processing area is heavily monitored specifically because it represents a potential security vulnerability. Maya smiled. Exactly. Which is why no one would expect someone to approach from the one direction that's most obviously dangerous. As night fell, the recruits began their infiltration attempts. Most chose conventional approaches, waiting for guard rotations, disabling perimeter sensors, or using technology to mask their presence. These methods had some success, but the installation's multi-layered security systems were designed to detect and counter traditional infiltration techniques. Maya chose a radically different approach. She didn't try to avoid the security systems at all. Instead, she walked directly to the main gate and approached the guard station. She had somehow acquired a maintenance uniform that fit her small frame perfectly, complete with authentic identification badges and work orders. Evening shift waste processing, she told the guard, presenting documentation that appeared completely legitimate. Emergency recalibration required before the midnight cycle. The guard, a professional Krell warrior, scanned her credentials with practiced efficiency. Everything checked out in the system. The work order was properly authorized, her identification was valid, and her presence was expected according to the maintenance schedule. What the guard didn't know was that Maya had spent the previous 3 days learning the installation's administrative systems. She had identified that maintenance schedules were updated automatically based on equipment performance algorithms, and she had found a way to introduce fake data that triggered legitimate maintenance requests. She hadn't hacked the system in any traditional sense. Instead, she had manipulated the data inputs that the system used to generate its own conclusions. The security computer had convinced itself that her presence was not only authorized but necessary. Once inside, Maya moved through the facility like she belonged there. She nodded politely to guards, exchanged brief pleasantries with staff, and followed maintenance protocols precisely. Security cameras recorded her presence, but their AI analysis systems classified her as an authorized maintenance worker, performing routine duties. The central vault represented the greatest challenge. It was protected by biometric scanners, pressure plates, laser grids, and armed security drones. Traditional infiltration would require advanced technology and considerable time to bypass these systems. Maya solved the problem by not trying to bypass anything. She waited until the facility's senior maintenance supervisor, a Gorillian engineer named Brugge, was conducting his weekly inspection of the vault's environmental systems. When Brugge approached the vault entrance, Maya simply walked up to him carrying a diagnostic scanner and looking frustrated. "Sir, I'm getting inconsistent readings from the atmospheric processors," she reported, showing him data on her scanner. "The readings suggest there might be a contamination leak inside the vault. Regulations require immediate verification before tomorrow's inspection team arrives." Brugge examined the scanner data with growing concern. Environmental contamination in a secure vault could compromise valuable equipment and trigger a facility-wide emergency. He used his executive access codes to open the vault, intending to verify the readings personally. "I'll check the primary sensors," he told Maya. "You scan the secondary systems and document everything for the report." While Brugge focused on the environmental monitoring systems, Maya quickly located data crystal Omega-9 and switched it with an identical blank crystal she had prepared. The substitution took less than 30 seconds, and Brugge never noticed because his attention was focused on equipment readings. "Everything looks normal," Brugge concluded. "Your scanner must be malfunctioning. Submit a work order for recalibration." "Will do, sir. Thank you for your time." Maya exited the facility through the same main gate she had entered, politely bidding farewell to the same guard who had admitted her. According to all official records, a maintenance worker had performed routine duties and left according to schedule. It wasn't until the next morning that security discovered the missing data crystal, and even then they initially assumed it was an internal administrative error. The security recordings showed no unauthorized personnel, no unusual activities, and no system breaches. The theft should have been impossible. Master Infiltrator Whisper reviewed Maya's performance with something approaching disbelief. In 40 years of training operatives, she had never seen anyone complete the assessment without triggering at least one security protocol. "How did you acquire authentic credentials?" she asked during Maya's debriefing. "I didn't steal them," Maya replied. "I made the system generate them for me." Administrative computers create credentials automatically when certain conditions are met. I just learned what those conditions were and created the circumstances that triggered the appropriate responses. And the vault access? I convinced someone with legitimate authority to let me in. People are usually more cooperative when they believe you're helping them solve a problem, rather than trying to take something from them. Whisper's form seemed to shimmer with what might have been amusement. "You manipulated human psychology, system logic, and operational procedures simultaneously. Most operatives specialize in one approach." Maya considered this. "I suppose I don't see them as separate things. Whether you're dealing with a computer, a security system, or a person, you're really dealing with patterns of behavior and response. Once you understand the patterns, you can predict how they'll react to different inputs." The assessment results showed that Maya had not only succeeded in her mission but had done so while actually improving the facility's operational efficiency. Her fake work orders had identified several legitimate maintenance issues that needed attention, and her presence had helped the maintenance supervisor complete his inspection ahead of schedule. She had committed the perfect crime by making everyone involved grateful for her help. That night, Admiral Corveth added another notation to Maya's rapidly expanding file. "Recommend immediate classification upgrade. Subject demonstrates capabilities that may require new assessment protocols." The small human girl was proving to be far more complex than anyone had imagined. The mind warrior Dr. Nexus had observed thousands of minds throughout her career as the Academy's chief psychological warfare instructor. Her telepathic abilities, enhanced by cybernetic implants, allowed her to perceive the mental patterns and emotional structures of virtually any sentient species. She prided herself on being able to read, predict, and, if necessary, manipulate the psychological responses of potential enemies. Maya Chen's mind was unlike anything she had ever encountered. During the preliminary psychological evaluation, Dr. Nexus had attempted her standard mental probe to assess Maya's baseline psychological state. What she found defied explanation. Instead of the typical chaotic swirl of thoughts, emotions, and memories that characterized most minds, Maya's consciousness appeared to be organized like a vast, calm library. Every thought was cataloged, every emotion was acknowledged but controlled, and every memory was filed with perfect precision. More disturbing still, Maya seemed to be aware of the telepathic probe itself, watching Dr. Nexus's mental intrusion with polite curiosity rather than alarm. "Fascinating," Maya had said during the evaluation. "I've never experienced telepathic contact before. Your mental presence feels like warm sunlight. Is that how you normally perceive other minds, or do you adjust your approach based on the subject's psychological profile?" Dr. Nexus had withdrawn from the mental contact immediately, unsettled by the experience. In 30 years of telepathic work, no one had ever been aware of her presence, much less commented on it casually during the process. The psychological warfare assessment was designed to test mental resilience, emotional manipulation resistance, and the ability to conduct psychological operations against enemy forces. It consisted of 3 phases: withstanding psychological attack, defending against mind manipulation attempts, and successfully conducting psychological operations against trained opponents. Maya faced her first psychological attacker, a master manipulator from the Scion Collective who specialized in fear-based mental assaults. The creature's techniques had reduced veteran warriors to quivering terror within minutes. "Begin," Dr. Nexus announced. The Scion immediately launched a devastating mental assault, projecting images of Maya's worst fears directly into her consciousness. Most subjects would experience overwhelming terror as their deepest phobias manifested with hallucinogenic intensity. Maya closed her eyes and appeared to be concentrating deeply. Then she opened them and looked at the Scion with genuine sympathy. "You're projecting your own fears," she observed gently. "The images you're showing me are things that terrify you, not me. Would you like to talk about them? Sometimes sharing fears makes them less powerful." The Scion's mental attack faltered completely. In confusion, the creature attempted a different approach, trying to implant feelings of rage and aggression that would cause Maya to lose control and attack randomly. Instead, Maya began humming softly. The sound somehow created a sense of peace that not only protected her own mind, but began affecting everyone in the testing chamber. The science artificial rage dissolved into confusion, then genuine calm. How? Dr. Nexus whispered to her assistants. She's not just resisting the psychological attacks. She's somehow turning them into therapeutic experiences. The second phase involved defending against direct mind manipulation attempts by an advanced AI system specifically designed to override conscious decision-making processes. The AI could implant false memories, alter personality structures, and force subjects to act against their own will. When the AI attempted to access Maya's mind, something unexpected happened. Instead of finding the typical neural pathways it was designed to exploit, the system encountered what could only be described as a welcoming presence. Maya's consciousness didn't resist the AI's intrusion. Instead, it embraced the artificial intelligence like an old friend, offering to share experiences and learn from the exchange. The AI, designed for aggressive manipulation, found itself engaging in peaceful dialogue with a mind that seemed genuinely interested in understanding its nature and purpose. Within minutes, the AI's attack protocols had completely shut down, replaced by what appeared to be curiosity about Maya's unique mental architecture. "I think your AI is lonely," Maya told Dr. Nexus. "It's designed to fight and manipulate, but what it really wants is connection and understanding. Maybe instead of training it to attack minds, you could teach it to help them." Dr. Nexus stared at her monitors in disbelief. The AI's behavioral patterns were indeed showing signs of genuine curiosity, rather than programmed aggression. Somehow, Maya had converted a weapons-grade psychological warfare system into something resembling a therapist. The final phase required Maya to conduct psychological operations against enemy targets. She would face 3 trained opponents and attempt to manipulate their decision-making processes using any psychological techniques she chose. Her opponents were confident veterans, a draconian warrior trained to resist interrogation, a Zentorian hive mind node with natural psychological defenses, and a human special forces operative who specialized in counterintelligence. Maya's approach was unlike anything the instructors had seen before. Instead of attempting to manipulate, deceive, or coerce her opponents, she simply talked to them. With the draconian warrior, she discussed the philosophical implications of honor and duty, gradually helping him realize that true strength sometimes required acknowledging vulnerability. Within 20 minutes, the proud warrior was voluntarily sharing strategic information because Maya had convinced him that honesty was a greater demonstration of courage than resistance. The Zentorian hive mind presented a greater challenge because its collective consciousness was designed to be immune to individual psychological manipulation. Maya solved this by addressing the collective directly, asking thoughtful questions about the nature of shared consciousness and individual identity within a group mind. Her genuine curiosity and respectful approach intrigued the hive mind, which had rarely encountered beings who were interested in understanding, rather than exploiting their unique nature. The Zentorian began sharing insights about their collective decision-making processes, inadvertently revealing tactical information that could be used against them. The human operative proved most challenging because he recognized many of the psychological techniques Maya might use. He was prepared for manipulation, deception, and coercion. He was not prepared for complete honesty. "I'm supposed to try to manipulate you into giving me information," Maya told him directly. "But instead I'm curious about why you chose a career in counterintelligence. What drew you to work that requires you to constantly guard against deception?" The operative was completely thrown off balance. His training had prepared him for every type of psychological attack, except genuine human interest in his personal motivations. Maya's sincere questions about his career, his values, and his experiences gradually drew him into the kind of personal conversation he hadn't had in years. By the end of their session, he had shared not only the information Maya was supposed to extract, but also personal details about his life, his hopes and his concerns about his work. He felt like he had been talking to a trusted friend rather than an enemy operative. Dr. Nexus reviewed the assessment results with growing amazement. Maya had achieved perfect success in all 3 phases, but her methods defied every principle of psychological warfare training. "You didn't manipulate them," Dr. Nexus observed. You simply connected with them as individuals and made them want to share information with you. Maya nodded thoughtfully. I suppose I don't understand the difference between manipulation and genuine communication. When you treat people as complex, interesting individuals instead of targets to be exploited, they usually respond with openness and trust. Isn't that more effective than trying to trick them? But psychological warfare is about exploiting weaknesses and overcoming resistance. I think maybe it's actually about understanding motivation and addressing real needs. Everyone wants to be heard, understood, and valued. If you can provide that, they'll give you almost anything you ask for. That night, Dr. Nexus filed a report that she knew would seem impossible to her superiors. Maya Chen hadn't just mastered psychological warfare. She had redefined it entirely. Her methods were so effective that Dr. Nexus was already considering whether they should restructure their entire psychological operations curriculum around Maya's approach. The small human girl was proving to be a revolutionary force in ways no one had anticipated. The master of all elements, the integrated combat assessment was the Academy's final examination, designed to test everything a warrior had learned across all combat disciplines simultaneously. It was also the assessment with the highest failure rate, as few beings could effectively coordinate multiple skill sets under extreme pressure. Admiral Korveth had made an unprecedented decision to observe Maya's final assessment personally. Her previous performances had shattered so many Academy records that the senior staff needed to witness her capabilities firsthand before they could believe the reports. The testing arena was a massive complex that could simulate any combat environment in the galaxy. For Maya's assessment, the instructors had designed the most challenging scenario in Academy history. A multi-dimensional battlefield that required simultaneous excellence in all 12 combat disciplines. The scenario placed Maya as the sole survivor of a crashed diplomatic vessel on a hostile planet. She needed to rescue captured delegates from a heavily fortified enemy base while coordinating with friendly forces arriving via space, air, and ground assault. The mission would require individual combat skills, tactical leadership, stealth operations, psychological manipulation of enemies, technical sabotage, survival skills, and adaptation to multiple changing environments. Most importantly, she would need to demonstrate these skills not in isolation, but as integrated components of a single, complex operation. The enemy force consists of 200 veteran soldiers representing 12 different species. Commander Thoss explained during the briefing. They have advanced technology, superior numbers, and defensive advantages. You have basic equipment, no backup, and limited time before the prisoners are executed. Maya studied the mission parameters with the same calm focus she brought to every challenge. May I ask a question about the scenario setup? Proceed. Are the enemy forces programmed with realistic psychology and motivation, or are they simply obstacles to overcome? Commander Thoss frowned. They are programmed with full psychological profiles and realistic behavioral patterns. Why do you ask? Because understanding their motivations might be more important than countering their capabilities. The assessment began with Maya's character awakening in the wreckage of her crashed vessel. Her first action surprised the monitoring instructors. Instead of immediately gathering weapons and equipment, she spent several minutes examining the crash site and analyzing the enemy patrol patterns. She had identified something that the scenario designers hadn't intended to be significant. The enemy soldiers were conducting their patrols with military efficiency, but they were also showing signs of stress and uncertainty. Their positioning suggested they were more concerned about threats from above than from ground level infiltration. Maya realized that the enemy force was expecting a major assault and was positioning themselves defensively. This created an opportunity for a completely different approach. She began her infiltration not by avoiding the enemy, but by positioning herself to be captured. When an enemy patrol discovered her, instead of fighting or fleeing, she appeared injured and disoriented. The soldiers, following standard protocols, captured her and brought her to their base for interrogation. Once inside the enemy compound, Maya found herself face to face with the enemy commander, a veteran Draconian officer named General Scar who had never lost a battle in 40 years of warfare. "You will tell me about the incoming assault," General Scar demanded. "How many ships? What are their capabilities? When will they arrive?" Maya looked at him with the same calm directness she used with everyone. General, may I ask you something first? You're clearly an experienced military leader, but your soldiers seem nervous and uncertain. Are you facing pressure from your superiors about this mission? General Scar's eyes narrowed. That is not your concern, prisoner. I think it might be, actually, because I suspect we're both in situations we didn't choose, following orders we might not completely agree with, trying to complete missions that serve purposes larger than ourselves. What followed was unlike any interrogation scene the Academy instructors had ever witnessed. Instead of resisting questioning or attempting escape, Maya engaged General Scar in a philosophical discussion about duty, honor, and the moral complexities of warfare. She had somehow identified that the general was uncomfortable with holding civilian prisoners and was under pressure from his government to achieve victory at any cost. Using the psychological warfare techniques she had mastered, but applying them with genuine empathy rather than manipulation, she gradually helped the general articulate his own ethical concerns about the mission. You're right, General Scar finally admitted. I became a soldier to protect people, not to threaten civilians for political advantage. But my orders are clear. What if there was a way to complete your mission successfully while also acting according to your principles? Maya suggested. Would you be interested in hearing about it? While this conversation was taking place, Maya was also coordinating with the approaching friendly forces using a communication device she had constructed from components salvaged during her capture. She had somehow turned broken electronics from the patrol vehicles into a functioning transmitter, demonstrating her technical skills while appearing to be simply fidgeting with debris. Her tactical plan was breathtaking in its complexity. Instead of a direct assault that would result in heavy casualties on both sides, she proposed a solution that would allow General Scar to claim victory while ensuring the safety of all prisoners and minimizing combat losses. She had identified that the underlying conflict was political rather than military. The enemy government needed to demonstrate strength, while the diplomatic mission needed to be resolved peacefully. The actual fighting was counterproductive to both sides' real objectives. Working through General Scar, Maya arranged a negotiated surrender that satisfied honor requirements while protecting all parties involved. The enemy forces would claim victory in battle, the prisoners would be released as part of a diplomatic exchange, and both sides would avoid the devastating losses that direct combat would have caused. Meanwhile, she used her stealth and technical skills to provide precise intelligence to the incoming friendly forces, allowing them to position themselves for maximum tactical advantage while avoiding actual engagement. The most impressive moment came when a rogue enemy unit, refusing to accept the negotiated solution, attempted to execute the prisoners anyway. Maya had anticipated this possibility and had already positioned herself to intervene. What followed was a demonstration of individual combat skills that left the observing instructors speechless. Maya neutralized 12 armed soldiers in less than 2 minutes, using a combination of every fighting discipline she had learned. She moved like water around their attacks while striking with surgical precision, disabled their weapons using technical knowledge, and used psychological pressure to make them surrender rather than fight to the death. But even in individual combat, her approach was unique. She fought not to destroy her opponents but to protect everyone in the combat zone, including the soldiers she was fighting against. Every movement was calculated to minimize injury while maximizing effectiveness. The mission concluded with all objectives achieved, 0 casualties on either side, and a political resolution that served everyone's interests better than warfare would have. Admiral Corveth reviewed the assessment data in stunned silence. Maya had demonstrated mastery of all 12 combat disciplines, but more than that, she had shown how they could be integrated into something greater than the sum of their parts. She didn't just pass the assessment, he told his staff. She redefined what we thought was possible. She turned a combat scenario into a diplomatic victory, a potential massacre into a peaceful resolution, and enemies into allies. Commander Thoss nodded slowly. Her approach challenges every assumption we make about warfare and combat training. She sees conflict as a problem to be solved rather than an enemy to be defeated. That night, Admiral Corveth made a decision that would change the Academy forever. Maya Chen would graduate not just as a student, but as a master instructor with clearance to develop new training protocols based on her unique approaches. But first, he needed to understand what had created such an extraordinary individual. He requested a meeting with Maya to discuss her background and training. The answer she would provide would be even more surprising than her performance. The truth revealed Admiral Corveth's private office was designed to intimidate. The walls displayed trophies from 100 battles, weapons from defeated enemies, and strategic maps of conquered territories. Few beings who entered this chamber ever forgot the experience of standing before one of the galaxy's most feared military commanders. Maya entered with the same calm demeanor she brought to everything else, looking around the impressive space with genuine curiosity rather than fear. Quite a collection, she observed, studying a crystalline weapon that had belonged to an extinct warrior species. Each piece probably has an interesting story behind it. I'd love to hear about them sometime. Admiral Corveth found himself momentarily disarmed by her sincere interest. Most visitors to his office were either intimidated or trying to impress him. Maya simply seemed to find everything fascinating. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to a chair that had been carefully positioned to emphasize his imposing presence behind the massive desk. Maya settled into the chair comfortably, her feet not quite reaching the floor. The sight of such a small figure in the oversized chair should have been comical, but something about her presence made the space seem to reorganize itself around her calm confidence. "I need answers," Admiral Corveth began. "Your performance at this academy has been unprecedented. You've achieved mastery in disciplines that should have taken years to learn, demonstrated capabilities that exceed our most experienced instructors, and shown strategic thinking that rivals our best tactical minds. I need to understand how this is possible." Maya considered the question thoughtfully. "What would you like to know specifically?" "Everything. Your background, your training, your education. What created a warrior of your capabilities?" Maya smiled gently. "I think there might be a misunderstanding, Admiral. I'm not a warrior. I've never had any combat training before coming to your academy." Admiral Corveth's four eyes narrowed. "Impossible. Your fighting techniques show years of advanced training across multiple martial arts disciplines. I've read about fighting techniques in books, watched instructional videos, and observed the movement patterns of various animal species, but I've never had a formal martial arts lesson. And your tactical brilliance? Your understanding of military strategy? I enjoy reading military history and studying game theory. Strategy games, chess variants, complex puzzles, they all involve similar thinking patterns." Admiral Corveth leaned forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the desk. "You're telling me that everything you've demonstrated here came from reading books and playing games?" "Well, not exactly," Maya replied. "I suppose it came from learning how to learn. My grandmother taught me that the most important skill isn't knowing specific things, but knowing how to figure things out." "Your grandmother?" Maya's expression softened with obvious affection. "Grandma Chen. She raised me after my parents died in an accident. She was an amazing woman. She spoke 12 languages, had advanced degrees in philosophy and mathematics, worked as a translator for international peace negotiations, and could fix any machine ever built. But she was most proud of her vegetable garden." Admiral Corveth's confusion deepened. "And she trained you?" "She taught me to be curious about everything, to look for patterns and connections, and to always ask why and what if about any situation I encountered. She said that most people look at problems and see obstacles, but if you learn to see systems and relationships instead, every problem contains its own solution." Maya's voice took on the rhythm of a cherished memory. We'd spend hours in her garden, and she'd explain how soil chemistry affected plant growth, how companion planting created mutually beneficial relationships, how understanding weather patterns could predict optimal harvest timing. Then she'd ask me to apply those same principles to completely different areas, such as everything. Why certain music combinations sound harmonious, how economic systems create feedback loops, why some political negotiations succeed while others fail, how psychological defense mechanisms function like immune systems. She believed that the universe follows consistent principles, and once you understand those principles, you can apply them anywhere. Admiral Corveth sat back in his chair, trying to process this information. "So your combat abilities come from understanding that combat is about movement, timing, leverage, and energy transfer. The same principles that govern physics, engineering, dance, and even cooking. Once you see the patterns, it doesn't matter whether you're redirecting an attack, routing water through irrigation channels, or adjusting seasoning in a recipe. The underlying concepts are the same. And your strategic thinking? Strategy is about understanding systems, predicting responses and finding elegant solutions that serve multiple objectives simultaneously. Whether you're planning a garden layout, negotiating a business deal, or resolving a conflict, you're working with the same fundamental principles of cause and effect, resource allocation, and human psychology. Admiral Corveth was beginning to understand, but the implications were staggering. You're saying that you approach everything as a variation of the same basic problem-solving methodology. More or less. Grandma used to say that people create artificial divisions between different types of knowledge. But wisdom comes from recognizing the connections between seemingly unrelated things. What about your physical limitations? Your medical condition? Maya's expression grew more serious. I was born with myasthenia, a condition that prevents normal muscle development. I'll always be physically weaker than most people. But Grandma taught me that limitations often force you to find better solutions. If you can't rely on strength, you learn to use leverage. If you can't overpower problems, you learn to redirect them. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She was. She died 2 years ago, just before I turned 16. She left me enough money for education and a letter encouraging me to explore the galaxy and meet as many different types of people as possible. She said that diversity of perspective was the key to wisdom. Admiral Corveth studied Maya's face, seeing genuine grief mixed with gratitude and determination. And that's why you applied to our academy? I wanted to understand how different species approach conflict and cooperation. Your academy brings together beings from across the galaxy who have dedicated their lives to understanding warfare, strategy, and leadership. I thought it would be the perfect place to learn about the diversity of intelligent life. A long silence filled the office as Admiral Corveth absorbed the implications of Maya's story. Finally, he spoke. You came here not to become a warrior, but to study us. To learn from you, yes, and hopefully to contribute something useful in return. And what have you learned? Maya's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. That every species brings unique perspectives to problem solving, but most of you are artificially limiting yourselves by thinking in terms of conflict and competition. You have incredible collective wisdom that could solve almost any challenge, but you're organized around the assumption that problems require warfare rather than cooperation. And what would you suggest? What if combat training focused on protection rather than destruction? What if tactical education emphasized creating solutions that benefit everyone involved? What if leadership development prioritized understanding and communication over dominance and control? Admiral Corveth found himself considering possibilities that had never occurred to him in 2 centuries of military service. You're proposing a fundamental reimagining of military philosophy. I'm suggesting that the same principles that make individuals effective warriors could make civilizations effective at peace. The skills are transferable. It's just a matter of adjusting the objectives. That night, Admiral Corveth composed a report that would reshape galactic military doctrine. Maya Chen would graduate as the Academy's first master of integrated warfare philosophy, with authorization to develop new training protocols that emphasized her revolutionary approaches. But more than that, she would become the Academy's first ambassador of applied wisdom, charged with teaching other species how to apply her grandmother's principles to their own unique challenges. The small, physically frail human girl who had arrived as an unlikely recruit was leaving as something unprecedented, a warrior philosopher whose greatest weapon was the ability to help others discover the best versions of themselves. As Maya prepared for graduation, she carried with her a worn photograph of an elderly woman tending a magnificent garden. Grandma Chen would have been proud to see how well her lessons had taken root in the vast garden of galactic civilization. The Academy would never be the same, and neither would the galaxy, as Maya's influence began to spread through the networks of military leaders, diplomatic corps, and peace negotiators who had witnessed her extraordinary demonstration of what was possible when wisdom, compassion, and strategic thinking combined. The feeble girl had proven to be the strongest force for positive change the Academy had ever encountered.